The medical community has had a huge breakthrough recently. 57-year-old David Bennett Sr. may have just helped prove that genetically modified pig hearts could be used as human ones. This could lead to hundreds of thousands of people being saved by pig organs. It's crazy, right? Well, this 8-hour surgery that took place in Baltimore at the University of Maryland on Friday, January 7, 2022, may have just saved Mr. Bennett's life. Mr. Bennett's heart was dying before, and the doctors told him he wouldn't have much time to live, so he took part in the experimental surgery to have a second chance at life. It's almost been 1 week since the surgery, and he's still doing amazing. The director of the cardiac transplant program at the medical center, Bartley Griffith, who performed the surgery, is very hopeful but cautious, saying, "We are thrilled, but we don't know what tomorrow brings us. This has never been done before." The best thing about this is that if it works long term, then so many people can be saved by not just pig hearts, but pig organs. There's a huge shortage of organs around the world because of less and less people signing up to be an organ donor, so this could really save so many people around the world. I think we all need to give Mr. Bennett a huge round of applause for gambling on the experimental treatment. He's still on a heart-lung bypass machine, but that isn't unusual after a heart transplant. Doctors say the heart is already doing most of its functions, and they are planning on taking him off a bypass machine soon. I think one of the most important things to take from this is to just sign up to be an organ donor. It's not like you're going to be using them after you hit the eternal hay. It's crazy to think that doctors back then used to use leeches to suck out the bad blood, and now we're using genetically modified pig organs to save our own. Hopefully we will have an update soon on Mr. Bennett, but I wish him and his family a very good luck and hoping and praying for you. That's Savannah Pennifill signing off. Bye!
A major war is on the horizon. In recent months, Russia has stationed around 100,000 troops and conducted military drills along its border with Ukraine, sparking international fears of a potential invasion of the country. Relations between Russia and Ukraine have deteriorated in recent years as the two have been engaged in on-again, off-again armed conflict since 2014. Russia has always maintained Ukraine to be a rightful part of them and have been preparing to take it back for some time. For Russia, the invasion of Ukraine is about taking back lost land, reasserting their geopolitical relevance, and forcing the West to the discussion table. They have been increasingly belligerent with NATO and the European Union as the two have expanded into Russia's sphere of influence in Eastern Europe right up along its borders. In particular, Ukraine and the West have been growing increasingly closer to each other, and there has even been some talk about Ukraine joining NATO, much to Russia's dismay. Last week, there were a series of high-stakes discussions between Russian and NATO officials that aimed at de-escalating the current tensions, however they did not go anywhere. Russia has made some demands in exchange for it to back off that cannot be met, and the two sides have strayed further apart from each other as a large armed conflict continues to look more likely. Russia is preparing to create justifications for them to invade Ukraine, including launching false flag attacks and making unreasonable demands to the West that they know cannot be met. They have also begun conducting military exercises both by itself and with Belarus, who is a close ally and borders Ukraine. If Russia can move troops through Belarus, they can invade Ukraine on all fronts. Europe is the closest it has been to war in decades, and all we can do is wait around for the inevitable. A Russian invasion of Ukraine is imminent. At this point, it's a question of when, not if.
Earlier this month marked the one-year anniversary of the Capitol insurrection, which was a result of the 2020 presidential election. Now the time has passed, some Republican officials are finally starting to wise up and realize that the election was won freely and fairly. However, the man behind the movement is still under the impression that the election was in fact a scam and that there were botched numbers across the country that led to his loss. Donald Trump, former president and Republican political figure, still makes it a point to spread the narrative that his loss against Joe Biden in the 2020 election was unfair and the numbers were corrupted. He called into an NPR interview with journalist Steve Inskeep to discuss the 2020 election and talk about how it led up to now. Trump said several times throughout the interview that the election was corrupt, rigged, and so on, and has discouraged Republicans to vote in the 2022 and 2024 elections. South Dakota Republican Senator Mike Rounds discourages any further discussion of the 2020 election, saying,
"We simply did not win the election as Republicans for the presidency. And if we simply look back and tell our people don't vote because, there's cheating going on, then we're going to put ourselves in a huge disadvantage.
Contrary to Rounds, Trump believes that it's beneficial to continue to talk about the 2020 election because, quote, otherwise they're going to do it again in 22 and 24. The former president claimed that there are findings in Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin that nobody thought possible. Doug Logan, who ran an audit in Arizona, found no problems that would have changed the result of the election. He said,
the ballots that were provided to us to count in the Coliseum very accurately correlate with the official canvass numbers.
Which resulted in Trump calling the Arizona Republican officials who disagreed with him rhinos, or Republicans in name only. He also had some of his former attorneys speak out against his claims of fraud, including Corey Langhofer, Trump's campaign attorney in Arizona, and Rudy Giuliani, Trump's former lawyer. He even resorted to speaking out against Minority Senate Leader Mitch McConnell, calling him a loser for not standing behind him.
Why is it that you think that the vast majority of your allies in the United States Senate are not standing behind you? We did have that statement by Mike Rounds.
Because Mitch McConnell is a loser.
He then ends the interview by saying that nobody believes that Biden could get 80 million votes, that the only way to avoid another fraudulent election is to solve the problem of the original, quote, rigged election, and abruptly leaving the call.
And the only way it's not going to happen again is you have to solve the problem of the presidential rigged election of 2020.
Mr.
Steve,
President,
if I'm...
Wait, one more question. I want to ask about a court hearing yesterday on January 6th. Judge Amit Mehta, he's gone. Okay.
Donald Trump has continued to spread the idea of this fraudulent election despite the fact that there has been evidence to prove the election fair. Trey Grayson, former Secretary of State of Kentucky, said, quote, the way I look at it is that I can't imagine that the party on its own would be pushing this narrative if he weren't pushing it, end quote. Donald Trump can and will do whatever he can to make sure his point stays alive, even if that means blaming others and rebutting against solid evidence. With the midterm elections coming up, the former president is starting to beat his GOP drum a little louder. And unless you follow him on Parler or watch hours and hours of Fox News, Trump was seemingly out of the public eye. But it has become clear that the former president could play a major role in how his devout following votes on November 8, 2022. In case you didn't know, all 435 seats in the House of Representatives and 34 seats in the Senate will be contested at the midterm, which means Donald Trump's public appearances may play a bigger hand in shaping the future of America than some could have thought possible.
Each year on the third Monday of January, we observe Martin Luther King Jr. Day and reflect on the work that still needs to be done for racial equality. King was an influential civil rights leader best known from his work on equality and ending racial segregation in the United States. The concept of Martin Luther King Jr. Day as a holiday was promoted by labor unions. After King's death, U.S. Representative John Conyers and U.S. Senator Edward Brooke introduced a bill in Congress to make King's birthday a national holiday. President Reagan originally opposed the holiday, citing cost concerns, but on November 2, 1983, Reagan signed the bill to create a federal holiday honoring King. The holiday was observed for the first time on January 20, 1986. Initially, some states like South Carolina and Virginia resisted celebrating the holiday, only to become the year 2000 when it was officially observed in all 50 states for the first time. Martin Luther King had a dream, and that was for there to be no racism and for everyone to be treated equal. Unfortunately, more than 50 years later, the dream has still not become true.
Bayard Rustin, the man behind the March on Washington, was one of the most significant organizers of the civil rights movement you may have never heard of. Rustin imagined how nonviolent civil resistance could be used to erase segregation in the United States. He organized around the idea for years and eventually introduced it to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but his identity as a gay man made him a target, so he was hidden. Rustin organized and led a number of protests in the 1940s and 50s and 60s, including the 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. While Rustin's homosexuality and former affiliation with the Communist Party led some to question King's relationship with him, King recognized the importance of Rustin's skills and dedication to the movement. In a 1960 letter, King told a colleague, "We are thoroughly committed to the method of nonviolence in our struggle, and we are convinced that Bayard's expertise and commitment in this area will be of inestimable value." Rustin became a key advisor to King during the Montgomery bus boycott. He first visited Montgomery in February 1956, and published a Montgomery diary in which, upon sitting in on a meeting of the Montgomery Improvement Association, he wrote, "As I watched people walk away, I had a feeling that no force on earth can stop this movement. It has all the elements to touch the hearts of all men." Rustin provided King with a deep understanding of nonviolent ideas and tactics at a time when King had only an academic familiarity with Gandhi. Rustin later recalled, "The glorious thing is that he came to a profoundly deep understanding of nonviolence through the struggle itself, and through reading and discussions which he had in the process of carrying on the protest." King recognized the advantages of Rustin's knowledge, contacts, and organizational abilities and invited him to serve as his advisor, well aware that Rustin's background would be controversial to other civil rights leaders. As King's special assistant, Rustin assumed a variety of roles, including proofreader, ghostwriter, philosophy teacher, and nonviolence strategist. This story was not to dismay MLK and all the great things he did to create equal opportunities for all in America, but rather shine a light on Rustin, who most may have never heard of. Rustin was hidden in the history of the MLK rallies due to his homosexuality, and it's so important that his story is finally being released and told.
Sidney Poitier, the first black man to win an Academy Award for lead actor and a towering role model for succeeding generations of black actors, died Thursday at the age of 94. Many of his best-known films explored racial tensions as Americans were grappling with social changes brought by the civil rights movement. In 1967 alone, he appeared as a Philadelphia detective fighting bigotry in a small-town Mississippi inn, The Heat of the Night, and a doctor who wins over his white fiance's skeptical parents in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Poitier's movies struggled for distribution in the South, and his choice of roles was limited to what white-run studios would produce. Racial taboos, for example, precluded him from most romantic parts, but his dignified roles helped audiences of the 1950s and 1960s envision black people not just as servants, but as doctors, teachers, and detectives. Poitier himself embodied a new man in the old world, of how black people were depicted in movies, the time's most influential popular culture. In less than a decade, his model would be upended by actor Richard Roundtree and director Gordon Parks' Shaft, a black hero for black audiences. By that time, Poitier had moved into directing, filling his films with black stars and telling stories he wanted to tell. In the wake of Poitier's death and the tragic event happening on the eve of our national holiday celebrating his friend Martin, it's worth remembering the civil rights movement had many foot soldiers serving on many fronts, and that the struggle for racial justice and equality continues to this day.
Back in 2002 to 2016, Coach Crounse was a coach here at Patuxent High School. While he was here, he was able to achieve a state championship. He was a state finalist. He won 6 SMAC championships. But after 6 years, what brings this great coach back to PAX?
So, what made you come back to Patuxent after all these years?
Well, Patuxent's home. This is where family is. This is where friends are. This is where I raised my kids. And 5 years away and had the opportunity to come back, and I'm really just blessed to have the opportunity and be part of this PAX Nation again.
All right. What are you wanting to achieve here while you're still here at PAX?
Well, there's lots of things, but as far as being specific to football, we want to get back to being a championship program. We want to compete for state championships, regional championships, SMAC championships. We want to make sure that we have a lot of participation from the young men at Patuxent High School, and that we use football, to help them develop as young men and fathers and husbands and everything else. Use the tools that we have in the football program to do that. So I'm really excited about what this can become again. We have a really long tradition of championship football and high caliber play, and we just want to get back to that.
All right. Final question. How will it feel to be coaching on the sideline with your own son, Tyler Crounse?
It's going to be great. I had a chance to coach with him a couple years ago. at DeMatha when he just got out at Shepherd, and I've had a Crounse on the sideline with me for a long time, whether it be Tyler Reese or Zachary. He's a fantastic young coach, and we're gonna we're really excited about what he brings to the program. So I'm sure it might be a little bit different than normal assistant coach and head coach. We might get after each other a little bit, but I think at the end of the day, we both want Patuxent to be a fantastic program. So I'm excited.
Thank you.
Coach Crounse is back, and I've known him since I was a child. My dad has known him because he was coached, and this guy is an amazing coach. So I am excited for what the next football year holds.
Hi, I'm Carson Vercoe. I'm here with
Cash Bingham.
Cash. What's your favorite fast food place?
Panda Express.
What is your usual order from there?
Double honey walnut shrimp and fried rice.
What is your favorite sport?
Baseball.
Why?
Because I've played it since I was a little kid and I just enjoy playing it and watching it.
What do you expect to do in the next 4 years with your life?
Hopefully go to a good college, maybe get a good degree in something, but I'm not really fully sure yet.
What is your dream job?
My dream job? I don't really know yet. I guess I'd say playing the MLB or something like that. Something along the lines.
Thank you. That has been 5 questions with Cash Bingham.
If you're thinking about taking AP Literature your senior year, but unsure of the reading, do not fear. I am here to give you a quick preview and rating about the books that we have read so far. This is the first book read in AP Lit titled The Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini. It is the story of Amir, a Sunni Muslim in Afghanistan who struggles to find his place in the world due to a series of traumatic childhood events. It takes place right before the turn of the century and highlights the effects that the war had in Afghanistan. Overall, the book is a good read. It digs deep into Afghani culture and the injustices that take place there. While it does have a slow build-up, once the story truly begins, it's hard to put down. Personally, I did not expect much from this book, and was surprised that I was as invested as I was. I give it a 7 out of 10. At some points, the story slowed and strayed from the main conflict, but ultimately, it was a worthwhile read. This is the second book by Khaled Hosseini, titled 1,000 Splendid Suns. Set in the same time and place, Maryam and Lila are 2 women forced together by war. Born a generation apart, and with very different ideas about love and family, they endure the never-ending battle with the Taliban's injustices in their home as well as in the streets of Kabul, forming an unlikely bond, ultimately altering the course of their lives. Initially, I expected to be bored out of my mind. It seemed like a copy and paste of the last book, and I was not interested in some girl's friendship. But 1,000 Splendid Suns blew my expectations out of the water. It was a heart-wrenching story that made The Kite Runner seem like a children's book. Even after finishing my work, I went back and finished the book just for personal pleasure. This book was extremely interesting. It never stopped taking unexpected turns, and while it was a very dark story, it made you want to read more. It gets a solid 9 out of 10, and I would recommend to read this book whether you're an AP Lit or not. So don't be afraid of taking AP Literature. You get to read 2 great stories to start off the year, and while it may seem like a chore initially, once you actually begin to read, you'll enjoy it. And as a bonus, you get to watch the movies in class, so suck it up and read some.